Welcome to this week's Fireside Chat with Jesse. I'm joined today by Stephen Holben, Senior Director of Digital Sales Strategy and Originations at Mitsubishi HC Capital America. Thanks for joining me, Stephen.
Oh, thanks for having me. I watch these on occasion and it's fun to get the invite.
No, I'm glad to have you on here. We'll just have to battle out between if Roman has more views or you. We'll just have to leave that internally to see who gets those bragging rights.
Well, and we sit right next to each other, so it's even more fun to have that little friendly competition.
Awesome. Well, appreciate your time today. I'm glad I didn't mess up that introduction because didn't want to have to go through that again. But Stephen, for those individuals who haven't had the pleasure of meeting you, do you mind just kind of introducing yourself and career to date in finance?
Yep. So my story starts interestingly with Navistar International. So I did a little bit of time there, and then when I got hired on at Ings, that was one of the things that triggered the recruiter to bring me in almost 10 years ago, was the connection between the financial systems, the financial analysis, and having exposure to the trucking industry from that standpoint. It was a little interesting when I first joined Ings back in the day, where the engines at Navistar were not well liked by the credit team, and that's the division I worked for. So that always added a little bit of fun, ribbing at my expense, back at that time. But so yeah, 10 years ago, I joined Ings as the finance manager, and really focused on FP&A, but also being the analytical thought process for any of the divisions that needed it, credit ops, accounting and finance, obviously. So I was able to do a lot of different things, learned a lot about the industry and the way we do business by doing those special projects for all the different teams. And then about 4 years ago, or just over 4 years ago now, the leadership team decided to dive in deeper into our digital sales strategy. And my boss at the time tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, we've identified you in this position if you're interested. If not, we'll find somebody else and I'll be comfortable," because, he liked the way we work together. And I have not always had the best experience with salespeople working on the finance side and the financial systems side. So when I told my wife, she's like, "You've had your issues with salespeople. Are you sure you want to jump into that, mindset?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can change it from the inside out." But
now I can tell them what to do.
You work with some people that you're like, "Oh, you seem like a used truck salesman."
Hey, there's always those few that kind of give the generalization of a salesperson a bit.
Right. But, in general, our sales team is good. I just like to give them a little bit of a hard time. And, one of our sales leaders, Ken Wietrick, he always, he said iron sharpens iron. And so we would have those fun jostling, sales versus finance conversations. And, when I joined the sales, side, he was like, the dark side finally won.
No, completely understand. I mean, it's happened to me a few times where product people come over to the sales side, like demos and stuff like that. They're just like, I'm like, yeah, don't you remember when you were the person who said the product couldn't do it? Stop selling it because the product could do that. And next thing you know, they're the ones that are saying, yeah, I think the product can, yeah, we can make that work. I'm like, what's going on?
It's that dark allure that just drags you in. And
hey, we want to make people happy, right? We want to make people happy.
Right. And so my job there was digging into how we use our data and our systems to improve our sales process. So it really started in with digging into our underserved dealer network, trying to identify the dealers that, we want to partner with, but, it wasn't one of our top 30 relationships for that region. So I had a sales team that was focused on building those out, trying to develop those relationships using our digital tools instead of the, traditional strategy of going out and visiting them, doing those site visits, on a monthly, quarterly basis, and using our tools, using Salesforce to bring those dealers back into the fold and develop them into a stronger relationship. And then also using our predictive purchase model to identify points in our customer's life cycle where it was likely they would be ready for that next piece of equipment. And so developing that, digging in deeper into those points, and having the team that reached out and made that first contact, and then passing it along to the sales team.
Sure.
And then when we merged Ings, Mitsubishi HC Capital America, and Mitsubishi HC Capital Canada or USA, we did a lot of different integrations and looked at the team dynamics. And at that time, I was asked to take on our data governance team, which does a lot with getting the data into the system up front. So then my predictive models can more accurately use it in the back end. So a year and a half ago, I added that team to my responsibilities.
Perfect. How many data people do you have?
Well, data is, so the data governance is our, it used to be app entry, but we wanted to make it, more focused around making sure that the data is good, maintaining it, owning the equipment catalog, doing all those things to make sure it comes in clean. So we don't do much on the data analytics. That's a couple different other teams and team members.
Oh, okay.
But,
Okay. I just wasn't sure because I know like data, I mean, you have different disparate systems with data, and some systems are easy to get data out of. Other people like lock down their platforms, and it's like, why? It's my data. Give it to me.
Right. And, I have people, because I learned how to use Salesforce as a power user early on. And so I still have, people and my analytical, skill set from the finance days, so I still get asked for help, running reports, analyzing data, looking at some information that, as the sales team needs it. I'm kind of the go-to guy for the sales team to dig into that stuff and help them. If I don't know the answer, I can usually tell them where to find it.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you for that. And how did you stumble across Navistar?
I was at a career fair at Michigan State, and it was my sophomore year going, looking for that summer job, and talked to an interviewer for their internship program. He said we were really only looking for juniors going into their senior year. So I talked to the guy the next year. He remembered me. We had a good conversation. So I moved, for the summer out to the western burbs of Chicago, did an internship, apparently did well enough to get a job offer before I went back to school. And I spent 3 years in the finance and accounting leadership development program that Navistar ran back then.
Perfect. Perfect. That was that question, how people got into equipment finance. And on Navistar, I really don't think they have an EF presence. We all know what they do.
They do again. So
they again?
sold to,
okay.
Yeah, they sold to BMO, or GE, I guess, before BMO, the retail business. And so they exited the retail business. They kept some of their fair market value leasing offerings. They kept the dealer floor planning. And then I think 18 months ago, they gave BMO the heads up that they were taking it back with the new Volkswagen ownership.
Okay.
So from what I understand, they're going back at it on the retail side. So
nice.
We'll see how it goes.
Nice. I just I had an opportunity to sell them Navistar, a system. I want to say this maybe has to be since you moved there. But what was interesting is they were obviously not too far away from you guys. And you guys were nice enough to open up the doors and show them your Salesforce platform with your existing backend. So I actually brought Navistar to meet with Ings at your office.
Yeah,
it would have been more
fun.
entertaining if you were in the room and like, hey.
We have some Navistar people from financial and some other parts that when you have a big manufacturer like that located in the same area as the finance company, there's going to naturally be some overlap there.
Sure, sure. You guys are just nice. You guys are a good organization. You guys are like, sure, we'll no issue, even though there's sort of competition. They're like, yeah, yeah, we'll show them
Yeah,
a little bit, not
going back to it, iron sharpens iron. How do we improve the company?
every.
Is we figure out where the competitors are doing and dig in deep there.
So note to self, people from trade associations who are watching this, sword fighting needs to happen. Just,
I could see that. Get some LARPing going on.
so Stephen, do you mind introducing Mitsubishi HC Capital America?
Yeah. So a few years ago, Ings was owned by Mitsubishi UFJ Lease and Finance, which had first entered the U.S. market in 1985 as Mitsubishi UFJ Lease and Finance USA. And then we were acquired as Ings by MUL in 2018. And we kind of operated, together but independently between Ings and the USA brand. And then our parents in Japan merged a few years ago. And so what used to be known as Hitachi Capital America was rebranded to Mitsubishi HC Capital America. And then last April, we merged the three operating companies into one so we could better leverage all of the best resources from, Mitsubishi HC Capital USA, Ings Commercial Finance, and Mitsubishi HC Capital America / Mitsubishi HC Capital Canada, because that was a subsidiary that they had up in north of the border.
What that used to be? That used to be what? Klee? Was that Klee back in the day that Hitachi acquired?
Sounds familiar.
Okay, sorry, I'm just
Yeah. So using all of those great strengths to create a solid, we're the largest non-bank, non-captive finance company in North America now. So we have 13 offices across North America. So we got a lot of coverage, a lot of different, responsibilities, expertises, and bringing them together to attack the market with all those different strengths that we have is our goal.
perfect. So is headquarters in Norwalk?
The headquarters is technically Norwalk. We've got a large contingent of people up there, and then the Itasca office, where I'm based out of, is where Craig and our president of vendor solutions, who I work for, Jim Friend, obviously they live here and started the company with Ings here. So I don't think they wanted to relocate their life. So our headquarters is in Norwalk, but both offices are pretty well staffed and similar size. And the responsibilities between the two are just a little bit different.
Perfect. And then from the assets that you guys lease and finance, just kind of walking through those for me if you don't mind.
Yeah, so we're separated into three different business units. Canada, which is its own entity structure because of obviously legal and regulatory and French requirements. That I have no idea how to speak French, and so I'm not sure how to do a whole lot of transactions in Montreal. And then we have our commercial finance division, which is run out of the Norwalk office mostly, which does structured finance, working capital, ABL lines, more money on money lending. That they're a sizable organization within our overall. And then I work for our vendor side. So, really diving into transportation, industrial, construction, healthcare, technology, franchise, and specialty markets. So that's where I'm reporting into. And, that's, I'm learning more about the commercial finance business because we want to take what we've done with our purchase prediction model and the lead generation team and see where we can expand it up to Canada and into the commercial finance space. So we've started to dig into the Canadian market space And we have a team member up there who's starting to build out that uh, ability. And so we're still growing, we're still integrating, and again taking the best of all three companies and finding ways to use those resources in different ways.
And that'll be interesting for you from a sales strategy perspective as they start to build that out, because it's a probably newer market.
Right. And the tricky parts there is the privacy rules are a little different in Canada, so you have to take that into account. I can't
However,
get
the
the same
taxes the
level.
taxes are easier though. The taxes are easier.
Yes, yes, they are. But when you're trying to figure out where I can get third-party data to do those analytical models, it runs into a little more of a headache with, how it's not Europe bad yet, but it's heading that way in terms of the privacy protections, which, as a consumer, I don't mind, but when you're data mining it makes it a little more difficult to figure that stuff out. And then, our predictive model was really built around our Salesforce data. So how do we take what we built here, knowing that our front end system is, the Salesforce information, and try to replicate those same automation processes in a different instance of Salesforce, which our Canadian team uses, but not in the same way that it's so integrated into our front end process. So, just building out the ability for the systems to generate those tasks and those ideas of when to trigger those calls to make those predictive model is it's taken some time for them to build that out, and that's where we finally hired in the team leader to start looking at that team and growing our capabilities up there.
Perfect. Thank you. And then from a merger perspective, it's all relatively fresh still, I would say. It seems like pretty much smooth sailing. One of the better transitions that I've heard or seen.
Yeah.
Any When that first happened, like, was there any like, oh man, what's going on?
Honestly, I don't think there was too much because the communication was pretty good.
Okay.
And the reason it was such an easy integration, in my opinion, is, we competed against each other in a few different markets, but the overlap was not as large as you would sometimes assume in the organizations that we had. You know, the Ings portfolio was about $1 billion at the time. The Hitachi transportation was a similar size. So you bring those two together, you'd assume there's a lot of overlap, but when we look at the regions, it was just a little bit of overlap where we both, had the same relationships with the dealers. But, you work it through and you reassign territories, you give everybody a good spot to go towards. And it was pretty smooth from that standpoint. The hardest part for us is, the different systems and trying to figure out what the strategy is around, how do we integrate the system so it's one platform as wide as we can. So again, like you were mentioning, different data sources, we're trying to build out our data warehousing to be a little more compliant with the way we want to run the business. And, it just takes time to learn that, A means Y, 3 means 7, and, getting those data definitions, combined in. So when we're talking about revenue or originations, that the math is the same math and you're not comparing apples and oranges.
Sure. It's much easier said than done.
Yeah.
I,
I'm just glad I don't
me
have
and
to
my
make
team
those
just
calls.
me and my team just deal with that on a regular basis, so I'm kind of just used to it by now. I would think the hardest
Yeah.
thing would be going from a 4-letter organization to around 23, 25. Sitting there
Well,
and
again,
saying,
you said the business learned it gets a little long, but it's good. Because it makes you think about, how you're introducing yourself. Because a lot of people thought Ings, was spelled ENGS. It was all caps. They were like, oh, what's that stand for? And it's like John Ings, the owner. So, it seemed like that type of mindset of, oh, it must stand for, Engs. And it's like, nope, it was literally the guy's last name who started the company in the 1950s.
Learn something new. I did not know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And having the three diamonds is great because it opens you up to some additional resources both within the Mitsubishi broader family, but also just name recognition. Again, Ings was great if you were in the industry, in that transportation space, in the industrial space, the construction space. But if you weren't, you didn't really have much, as strong of a brand as adding in those three diamonds from the Mitsubishi logo that goes into Mitsubishi HC Capital America.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I'm going to pivot a little bit to talk about the equipment finance industry, Stephen. So I think our paths probably, well, our paths first crossed at that ELFA event at some point in our careers. Do you mind just kind of discussing your thoughts on this industry and why you like to be a part of it?
The old running joke is that nobody picks the industry, it picks you. And, that kind of applied to me. It's, I knew about Navistar Financial. I had some conversations with people there, but I didn't partake in that, division of Navistar at the time. And, we had some accounting issues back in the day. So everybody learned about lease accounting for a couple days. We did some offsites with all the accounting and finance team members to refresh our knowledge on operating versus capital leases. So that helped me get prepared a little bit, and I brushed off my 3-ring binders from those 3-day classes before I joined the industry 10 years ago. But I was digging into the industry a little bit more, and I saw the emergence conference, and talked to my boss about going out there. And that was back in the day when you had to more apply with a letter of recommendation and stuff like that. So the first time I went was in 2019 out to Washington D.C. And I had gone to a couple of the networking receptions during the funding conference here, but it was always drive downtown, participate in the networking thing, go back and I don't want to say wipe my hands of it, but it wasn't that repeat. Whereas at Emergence, during the dine around, I sat down next to Cole, who you know very well because you hired him recently, and had a good conversation with him. And then the next year we joined ETAC together. And so when we saw each other's names in the, welcome to ETAC, it's like, oh, it's Cole. And, shortly after that, we went down to the funding conference again, and having that face that I had gotten to know made it a lot easier in the, ballroom of the Palmer House, where there's, hundreds of people having conversations, and, you're one of those guys that's moving around and knows everybody in the industry. So having that one to build out was a great start. And, through ETAC and, going to more events, more conferences, things like the Capital Connections, where you have that more intimate thing where you're meeting, various people across the, levels and types of industries, has been a great experience, and, allowed me to grow, my network as well as some great friends.
No, thank you for that. It's yeah, I mean, I just have a 10-year head start on you. Plus, was always in business development. So when you have a travel and entertainment budget, hopefully I did my job and throughout the years, but it can be a little overwhelming. Walking in my first conference was like every single person. I mean, granted, it was like 2005, but every single person was sitting there and they all knew each other. It's like, but they also are very welcoming too. Where if you walk up, chances are they will.
Right.
Hey, come on in.
Well, and even at those funding nights, you've introduced me to people, because we were talking, and I think, Kayla, I had met her at a different ELFA event, but we followed on with the conversation about her kid after the conversation you and I had started. So it's all been very welcoming and very pleasant. And
one of the reasons that we stay in this industry are the people that
exactly.
we get to see, and it makes I know being away from family and traveling can be challenging, but it's
Yeah,
also seeing those industry relationships, and sometimes it's only once a year, but it's like, okay,
yeah.
go see that person again.
Well, and the fun thing for me this year was my wife was able to join me at the annual conference down in Austin, and she doesn't go to fancy conferences and hotels and nice dinners. When she travels without me, it's usually to Girl Scout camps, and the beds are not nice. So and it's a good chance when during the summer events to take the kids to a different location that they haven't seen and combine that work and pleasure. And the first year I went to Capital Connections, I ran into a group of really phenomenal women and at the bar at the end of the night. And they're like, get your wife down here. You go upstairs with the kids. And it was like, well, she had a long day. She just needs a peace and quiet. But, talking to them and, some other different things. And then we were getting Mandy some dinner before I had one of my, actual dinners with the conference. And we were around the corner at the burger bar, just sitting while she was enjoying a nice burger. And that same group of ladies came by, and I don't want to say it was swarmed, but they were very excited to meet her. And the welcoming aspect of the industry to somebody who didn't have any idea who anybody was really great. And she had a great experience with the conference.
Yeah, it's always a difficult uh, situation, right? Where it's like, can I get a +1? And some of these dinners you can, other ones you really
Yeah.
can't. So it's, but, did the right thing. All right, let's get you some food, and then I'll figure it out. I actually, now that my son's almost 16, over the last, say, 3 years, I've been bringing him to some of the EF Cares events,
Oh, okay.
just so he can kind of start seeing, because what they always see is like, oh, Dad, you went to this baseball game. Oh, Dad, you went to this restaurant. Oh, you did this, and it's like, yeah, well, that's the byproduct of some of the work
Yeah.
that we do. That's the fun side. That's what makes this another rewarding part of it. But it's nice where you can actually see things in motion, how things are
Yeah.
actually done. I think because Capital Connections is a week later this year, um,
Okay.
I'm actually going to be bringing him to DC.
Oh, okay.
So it'd be nice because he's never
Is
been
the
there.
participant like we had somebody last year, their
Zach
daughter.
Marth brought his
Yeah,
Zach
Zach.
Marth brought his daughter. Yep. Yep. Now
So is it
I
same
don't know
thing
if I'll
where
torture.
he's gonna be able
I
to
I
participate
don't know.
or
I don't know if I'll torture him enough to. I'll have him come to the opening reception just to say hi to a few people, but I'm not
yeah.
going to torture him too much. That's kind of opposite of me. He's more of a quiet, reserved kid. Uh, you know, yeah, I've got to push him out of his element. But
Well,
now
you,
with
you got to
Rory,
get comfortable with the uncomfortable, right?
yeah, easier said than done. But no, I mean it is nice, and like one of the things you mentioned, it is a very welcoming industry, because it
Yeah.
can be intimidating, right? When you see all these people that have known each other for a while, you just, okay, how do I navigate this? And typically, all it takes is one conversation, and it's, hey,
Yeah.
it's this person. There's that
Yeah. And that's where, the ETAC especially has been good with, connecting with those, starting to get to those senior leaderships where, the people we see talking to each other did this 10, 15, 20 years ago. And, things like emergence, you know, starts opening those doors to those conversations with, 70, 80, 100 people. And, I've really appreciated the number of times I've gone to the emergence conference.
Well, and so before the call started, I was kind of telling you my kind of history with like one of your organizations, and you know, those people who were kind of at the mid level are now at the top level. So
Yeah,
the people that you've known for the last 10 years will eventually, as you grow, they will grow too. And that just, it's just good that, the ELFA, I guess, fosters
yeah,
those environments for that. It's basically going to be lifelong friends.
yeah.
Oh, we get to do
And we're
business with
doing
them.
so,
Cool.
yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like you talk to all these guys that are on the syndication desk and it's like, oh yeah, I know those, 300, 400 people. Then you talk to the accounting people at Emergence, they're like, yeah, I've never traveled to anything before. And so it's interesting to see the difference between the types of, responsibilities at those conferences and who knows more people and who doesn't. Is again, I started in finance and I didn't have those same opportunities to meet as many people in the industry until I started going to those events.
It's where you see me grab the hand of that person who doesn't know anyone and be like, all right, you're going to go to bed at 2 o'clock, but it's going to be fun.
Yeah. Talking about Roman, that's that's a guy that's out there way
Um,
after me.
So, from a volunteerism perspective, I know you've been really big on ETAC,
Yeah.
volunteering for the ELFA. What does that mean to you? And what would your recommendation be, Stephen, to somebody just getting into the industry?
Um, so I'll start on the recommendation, and that's really to, find ways to participate in those people power networking events. If like I said, I started because I went to the event downtown Chicago, um, just as somebody who didn't know anything about the industry. Then I reached out to join the CLFP, and again, that chance to learn and meet people in the industry. And at one of the networking events, I talked to Alexa from the ELFA about how do I help and how do I join and how do I provide some value there. And so taking that step, just jumping out there is a great way to start meeting those people, start understanding what we offer as an industry to those emerging talents, the emerging leaders, the recently emerged leaders, those opportunities. And the idea of coming from different backgrounds gives ideas around the way the industry can help foster growth, personally, professionally, and as an industry. And so, throwing those ideas out there doesn't matter, what your, background is, what company you work for. Everybody can bring good ideas to the industry and to the committees. And so there's a lot of value, no matter who you are, what you did, what you do now. So just throw your name out there. Um, this coming year is going to be my last year on ETAC and starting to think about how do I continue to grow. And, we recently talked about, what can I do more, you know, in the industry, but not technically with the ELFA with, Equipment Finance Cares. I went to the event in Ohio a couple of years ago and that was a blast. Went to the Chicago one last year and, formed a really great relationship with Hillary Bilbray, who volunteered to speak at that one. And now I consider her a great, friend and mentor within the industry, even though she's kind of not in the industry, uh, industry adjacent.
There
And
you go.
so, looking at, even if you're not on a committee, how can you else, participate? And, um, I've also started some conversations about looking at the foundation. And, again, I'm a data guy. I talked to Bill Choi for a few minutes about, what's my next step? Is there something I can do in the foundation to help with that? Um, I've always wanted to do one of the college speaker events. I
Huh?
just seem to never be able to figure out how to find the time or the organization to do that.
Let's
And so
just do one
I
one of these times. I'm in Chicago in 2 weeks, so that's not going to work. But the next time I'm
no,
there, let's just find a university and go. I've done
yeah,
4 of them at ASU.
okay.
They're
Well, and that
fun.
probably is even easier now that they have the partnership with
This
ELFA.
was before the partnership. I didn't do any last
Oh,
year,
okay.
but
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, sometimes you have 4 kids in a room, sometimes you have 40 plus, and it's just telling your story. But they're fun. Sorry.
yeah. Um, I've tried to do it at my alma mater, but the only time we go back to visit family is during breaks and holidays. So it's always hard to get that, that time to work out properly. But I'm trying to work with their finance association to do a virtual one. And that's the part I struggle with is, trying to convince somebody that the finance association is not always the best person to present that to. Because in the world, there's not as many finance and accounting positions as there are, all the other,
Mhm.
backgrounds.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's tough. I mean, there's so many different aspects. I mean, I had someone refer me to a young kid who's graduating from Cornell in
Hmm.
May, and I looked at his resume. I'm like, wow, this kid's going to be a great asset to an organization. And I just kind
Yeah,
of walked him through. What do you want to do? Because there's all
yeah,
these facets. I mean, like, what do you want to do?
yeah. Well, and that's, I lead a lot of early career people within the company. And my question to them is, what can I do to help you grow into that next role? What do you want to do? A lot of people go into sales from my team, but that's not always the path for everybody. The lead generation side, it's like, okay, this was great. I learned a lot. I'm going to maybe apply that to the operations or credit role or, one of the other, myriads. And so, being part of a bigger company, when I joined Ings, it was 100 people. Now we're, 750, 800 people. When you have that many people, it also opens up the number of types of jobs you can do within a company. So I'm really looking forward to that. Part of the merger is helping my team explore different parts of the industry and the different parts of our company.
Well, we'll just make sure we stay in contact on that one. Because curious to see how you make out and if how you do that, if it's repeatable and something we might be able to share some best practices with.
Yeah.
So, Stephen, I asked everyone who comes on here to give me a fun fact about themselves. So, what makes you tick outside of equipment finance?
So I'm big into food. So I like to cook, I like to bake. And the
Huh?
fun fact recently is I'm coming up on 2 years in the vanilla extract making process. So in the last 2 years, I've started like 16 or 17 different types of vanilla extract and vanilla paste. So
Interesting.
yeah,
How do we get to taste test
I'm
these to
about
see
to.
which one's better? Yeah, throw this one away. This one's good.
No, they're all good. They're just good in different ways. My Ugandan and my Sri Lankan beans are much better with chocolate because they have more of an earthy tone to them. Like some of them smell like raisins, kind of like it's vanilla, but there's raisin behind it. And
Interesting.
so there's all sorts of different.
You
I'm
do like
trying
a
to
time
convince
lapse.
man.
You do like a time lapse on the process, or does it just take too long?
I should, but using vodka, which is kind of the base model,
Yeah.
takes a year to extract. And then I've also got some spiced rums and some bourbon based extracts coming that are,
Okay.
it takes about 2 years for them to really hit their stride. And so those are going to be ready in March, April timeframe. So I'm really
Yeah.
looking forward to trying the rum and the bourbon based extracts.
Well, you know what? It just happens to overlap with the funding conference. So,
It does.
have to break
I
them.
may have to make some sugar cookies with different types of vanilla and, do a taste test.
That's awesome. During COVID, I got bored. So I started making like my own cheese
Oh,
pesto,
nice.
and even mayonnaise is so easy to make. You just don't
Yeah. And you can add all sorts of flavors really simply.
even realize. Yeah, the only problem with that is if you don't get the acidity or whatever correct, it doesn't emulsify, and you just sit there with this like
Yeah.
blah, and you're just like, what doing? It's
Now, do
wasted
you use a
oil.
whisk or do you use a food processor to make your mayonnaise?
Just an immersion.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
know.
Yeah.
What
The
is that? Is
stick
that an
blender.
immersion? Yeah, stick blender, where it's like just slow, but like literally, if I don't get that correct, it won't. I don't know, words emulsify, whatever. If you can make fun of me, I think that's right. It doesn't like
I
stick
think
it,
so.
so you're just kind
Yeah.
of like, what do I do with that? I don't want to waste it. Anyhow, but cheese, good. Basil, pesto. It's just
Oh, are you making like mozzarella or what kind of cheeses?
so. Yeah, let me take a step back here. So I like to make ricotta because it's the
Okay.
easiest. When I've done mozzarella, it's a lot that has to go to that. It's just like, look, I don't mind doing this, but that's a true commitment.
Well, and the hard part with that is how much better is yours versus, there's a grocery store near us that makes really good in-house mozzarella, the
Yeah,
balls,
I'm
and
not.
it's like,
I can't compete. I can't compete with that. And then it's like, oh, I can make burrata because that's like my favorite. And I looked at how to make it, and I'm like, I don't have the patience for
that's the best thing about the vanilla is once you batch it, it just sits on the shelf for, a year or two until you're ready to do it. So it's low effort, but the flavor profiles you get out of it is really fun.
I don't have that patience. Like literally, it's like this whole process I have. I think is like an hour. I can send you
Yeah.
some time lapse videos of doing both the pesto and the people are like, oh, how does it? I'm like, it's so easy. Or the
Now, do you go like bold with your pestos and do different combos, or is it just the traditional pine nut, basil?
pine nut, basil, olive oil. They ask for salt and pepper. I don't do that. And Parmesan. That's it.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm
I know
doing.
there's like walnut basil or walnut pestos, and you can. That's one of those ones that watching Food Network and stuff like that, you can really shift in a lot of different things to make you know slightly different flavor profile.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, okay, I got something that the family likes. I really don't want to jack with it too much. Um, the most creative thing I've ever. I'm not a baker. This baking to
Yeah.
me is like you have to almost follow directions. And
Oh,
I
it's
like to.
science. Yeah.
I'm not that guy. I'm like, yeah, let's try this, let's try that. So like, we had leftover. I made pumpkin pie um
Okay.
last week for Thanksgiving. We had leftovers, and I'm like, what do I do with this? So I looked up a pumpkin pie, like a pumpkin bread recipe, and
Oh,
I threw in what I thought I would need to throw in to make it like actual like bread, and it came out more like bars. It was delicious
oh,
because I
yeah. That's
cheated.
all that matters.
I cheated and threw in like chocolate chips.
That's yeah. Well, it's like cheese with cooking, right? If it doesn't quite taste right, throw in some cheese, and usually you're going to end up making it better.
Sure, sure. I just need to figure out the whole over salting thing and what do you do to cut down salt? It's hard. Anyhow, I love the fact that you have a passion for food and cooking. It's actually something that actually calms me down. If I'm stressed out,
Yeah,
just go cook. Now
yeah.
cleaning afterwards, not so much. But
That's the struggle.
so my last question I have for you, Stephen, is why should someone in the industry want to do business with Mitsubishi HC Capital
Um, I think it's because we have a great group of people working for us. The culture we have is one thing that, when we do surveys and stuff like that, uh, our culture and our, people are always top of those lists. Besides that, the strength of our parent in Japan and having the global assets that, and the access to those different, continents, we can work in Asia, we can work in Europe, we can work in the Pacific Islands, and we can work in North America. So that ability to cross the northern hemisphere is something that's really been a great opportunity post merger. And I think we like to be creative and entrepreneurial, so we try to get business done in a way that makes sense for us and our partners.
Perfect. Thank you, and well said. Appreciate your time today, man. And sure our paths, maybe our paths across sometime with you. But if not, I'm looking forward to the flavored cookies and maybe some alcohol. That's fun conference. That's good.
I've got plenty of bourbon in my actually, if you listen to Mandy, it's too much bourbon in my cabinet, but
Blasphemy. Well, we're going into holiday season. That's the time where it's going to be consumed. So.
Exactly.
All right, man. Well, you enjoy the rest of your day, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. You as well.